Wired into technology transformation, this is the Digital Bulletin podcast.
Hello, listener. Thank you once again for tuning in. This is episode 18 of the Digital Bulletin podcast, your monthly feast of technology chats and interviews. On board the pod today, we have listener favourite Digital Bulletin CEO Romilly Broad.
18, really?
18.
That's quite a lot now, isn't it?
Yes.
We should do something for the 20th, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And for the first time, content director for our Tech for Good magazine, it's Daniel Brigham.
Hello, Ben, and hello, Romilly.
Hi, Dan.
I have to say, it's an absolute privilege to be among such great podcasters. I've been listening from afar, and now I get to see how it works in action.
All the secrets will be revealed. How's everybody doing? Rom, obviously we had B on last month. Now Dan is making his debut, but you are immovable.
I'm not sure that's by choice. I don't seem to have a choice in this, right? I just get invited every time. I'm not sure if I'm really adding anything. Am I?
You're adding everything.
I'm like the default option, when you're setting your user settings up. I'm the one that I'm just there, right?
Yeah. Dan, you've already said it, but you're an esteemed company with Rom on the pod.
Also, I appreciate the fact Rom's put a suit jacket on as well.
I've just had a meeting.
Down to proper work here.
You've got to look the part for these video meetings, haven't you, these days? So I've got a jacket that I have on standby. Just whip it on if I don't want to look, like I'm too relaxed at home.
I do spend most of my time on calls in interviews with t-shirts, but jogging bottoms or a shirt and shorts underneath that. Hopefully, no one gets to see.
Well, you've just announced it now, so everyone knows. Is that what's happening right now? I can only see your top.
I have got shorts on here.
Oh, I suppose
shorts.
That's something.
I've not worn shorts for months, but they are very comfortable. So maybe I might start doing it. Excellent. Right, listener. Coming up on this month's episode, we are going to tackle head-on the uncomfortable topic of global cyber attacks and the very real threats to the world's economy. Fun. We'll also take a look back at our Bain Company case study, and I speak to FacilityLive's CEO Gianpiero Lotito. But first, here's some news. Right, let's start with Stripe, a $600 million funding round, which values the payments provider at a monster $95 billion. It is now the most valuable private fintech company in Silicon Valley, and the most valuable US startup, full stop. Now, elsewhere in the news recently, we saw the European Union make a commitment to fight the semiconductor shortage, which is causing blockages in the manufacturing world. It says it will double production of chips by 2030, meaning 20% of all chips globally will be produced on this continent. Now, it's been a trying few weeks for the McAfee name. Its founder, John McAfee, was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. I don't think he's actually associated with the company anymore, but the security firm itself has also announced plans to offload its enterprise business to Symphony Technology Group for $4 billion. Other stories of note, lots of money flying around this month. We've had a few big acquisitions, including Okta paying north of $6 billion for rival Auth0. We've had the news that JP Morgan is shutting down its digital wallet service, and Malaysia Airlines disclosed a data breach which lasted for 9 years. Now you can get access to the best reporting on those stories and many, many more via the Bulletin on digitalbulletin.com. But next, we are going to discuss a story that is rumbling on and on. That is the Microsoft Exchange hack and its ramifications on the enterprise and security worlds. Now, not that long ago, we ran an in-depth feature warning that another SolarWinds style attack might just be around the corner. What we didn't know was just how quickly it would happen. Hackers, originally from a state-sponsored group in China, recently found and began exploiting weaknesses in Microsoft's mail server Exchange, news that came to light earlier this month. Since then, hundreds of thousands of organizations worldwide have had their Exchange servers compromised, with different hackers jumping in and leaving responders racing to secure their data and systems. Rom, given the scale of the SolarWinds attack last year and now this, is it fair to say kind of we're dealing with a new, different and very scary kind of cybersecurity problem?
It's definitely new and it's definitely scary. I'm not sure how different it is, though, because, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about WannaCry and all of that stuff. And actually, we interview a lot of people, and it's not that long ago, months, not years, that we were still talking to people about the impact and consequences of WannaCry, and now we're talking about this one as well. And so, obviously, SolarWinds was and remains deeply serious, because obviously, in the end, I think it was a kind of crazy number of organizations that were compromised, but ultimately they kind of cherry picked just some really important ones, like, you know, the government in multiple forms, and not just in the US either, but, you know, all over the place. That's fairly major and ongoing, and now you've got this on top, which is mad. The real worry, I suppose, about the exchange thing is that it's a bit like WannaCry. It exposes the legacy underbelly of huge numbers of organizations, most of whom are just trying to do good things in the world. And it's the kind of what's the right word? It's the fact that this isn't really targeted. It's almost like damage is the goal for damage's sake, especially because I think something about the exchange attack means that it just opens the door to more WannaCry type ransomware stuff, where the main victims end up being organizations that don't necessarily prioritize their technical infrastructure because they've got much more important things to worry about, like hospitals. And that's what makes it so scary, I think, is that it's just you know, it's that, I think, when you attach the scale of the damage to the source of the damage, which seems to be state backed, you know, states that are opposed to the West, shall we say? I'm trying to come up with the right words. Then it adds this extra dimension to it, and it suddenly becomes part of a bigger cultural picture that isn't just about technology. It's about all sorts of things that we're talking about all the time, where sowing discord and problems is almost the aim in of itself. It's like, you know, inserting anarchy. Because disruption itself is a goal that's worth pursuing. And that, you know, that's not really cyber. That's just being horrible, isn't it?
Well,
it's not being horrible.
Yeah, can everyone just be nice?
Yeah.
Politically, we're gonna get onto the political kind of side of it in a minute, but you're right. It's kind of, the floodgates have kind of opened with this exchange one, haven't they? And I'm sure we don't even know 1% of the actual impact of what this is going to be. It seems, though, that the real concern with this one is the number of kind of different hacking groups, different hackers who are kind of jumping into it and have really got no kind of specific targets in mind. They're just kind of getting into whoever they can get into.
It's kind of like one of these awful doomsday counters. It's just going up, right? Everyone knows it's just going to keep going up. Patches are out there, right? Microsoft has got on top of it. Their patches are available, but that's the problem. There were patches available for the WannaCry stuff too, pretty quickly. That's not really the vulnerability really on a macro scale is the sheer scale, the sheer number of people that need to actually go and take some action, if they can. Not everybody can easily patch systems in that way. So it's an ongoing and pernicious and awful thing. Yeah.
Dan, with the SolarWinds one, obviously everyone knows the name SolarWinds now, but maybe before it wasn't a company that was on the tip of everyone's tongue. Microsoft, on the other hand, this is something they could really do without, isn't it?
Yeah, it almost feels like SolarWinds was kind of the up and coming indie band that no one had really heard of, playing small venues, whereas this is taking it properly sort of stadium rock band now. This is what takes it mainstream cyber attack. Whereas I think Joe Public saw cyber attacks as something rumbling along in the background that didn't really affect them. But now, with so many organizations and small sort of startups and small businesses affected, it's going to affect a huge amount of stuff, especially with people working remotely, leaving attacks more likely. It's going to start affecting people. And I think when the White House starts talking about it again, maybe perhaps with a slightly lighter touch than the previous administration, but when the White House is touching it, it's kind of a PR problem for Microsoft. But there's also an acceptance. This is our future. This is what's going to happen. Organizations are going to be hit. Whatever updates or patches they can put in place, they're still going to be, people are going to find a way to get through those defenses. So it's how quickly organizations can react is how they're going to be judged, I think. And as Rom said, they've sent out updates and patched stuff up pretty quickly. But again, that's really only for the organizations that can afford it and can do it on scale as well. There's still going to be thousands of businesses that have been affected that haven't been able to update yet. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how quick. Obviously, none of us are cybersecurity experts, but it seemed quick to us. But I think the first reports of the vulnerabilities were in right at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of January, right? And it wasn't until March that these fixes were released. You'll need to talk to someone who knows a lot more about it than me to know whether how rapid that actually is. But the fact is that right now those patches are available, and the real problem is getting everything patched. It's a bit like chasing a virus, right? It's like, how quickly can we remediate this problem? But I think there's a big difference as well, isn't it? And I don't want to belittle SolarWinds, because you can't belittle something that's that serious. But there's something a bit more cinematic about SolarWinds, and there's something about SolarWinds as well that is, I don't know, there's a more interesting narrative where in the end it comes down to people. I think that wasn't it the boss of the company essentially blamed an intern, right, for using a really dumb password on.
Was it SolarWinds 123 or something?
Right. It's like, I'm not an expert, but I don't do that. And you've got this interesting narrative where actually it all ends up coming back to a bad culture, a cybersecurity culture that isn't reinforced and embedded, and people like that. What your one weak point is not technology. In the end, as ever, it's a person. There's something, I guess, more sinister about the Exchange stuff, which is that there's a concerted effort to uncover 0-day vulnerabilities, so things that people just weren't aware of, and then to really smash them and maximize the damage you can do. And that's, I don't know, it just feels, as storytellers, it feels like it's a bit more Mordor.
Yeah, it does. It feels impossible to control as well. Maybe
right.
Can you get a vaccine for a for a hack? Because if you made the virus comparison wrong, but it feels like this is kind of like that in a way. It's just going to spread and spread and spread. Dan, you were going to jump in.
Well, I'm going to try Romilly Broad 123 after this for his password to see if I can hack in. But it's also interesting.
Let me just make a quick call. I'm just going to mute myself.
Microsoft have quite aggressively blamed China for this, which is fine for most American companies that have no presence in China whatsoever. But of course, Microsoft do. So it feels like they're already spinning. They know there's a PR problem that can come from this. So they're already spinning against China, because that obviously has played well in the States and other parts of the Western world and over the last couple of years as well. I mean, they've gone as far to call them a state-sponsored threat actor coming in for this, which when LinkedIn and Bing are still working in China and used pretty widely in China, that suggests they're already armoring themselves against China as a way of protecting their own their own PR.
Yeah, and there were similar links with Russia with the SolarWinds one as well. Rom, I'm going to bring it back to the topic that you volunteered earlier, the political side of it. You're definitely the best place to comment on this. Is this cyber warfare? Are we seeing cyber warfare?
Yes, but as I sort of mentioned earlier as well, there's nothing new about that either. I think the term that's used for these sorts of operations are what are they? Advanced persistent threats, or I think that's right, APT, right? And essentially, this is organized, extremely sophisticated groups that are either directly or loosely affiliated with nations themselves, as the acronym suggests. They're being advanced and they're being persistent, and it's basically just a day job. It's like, right, we need to just continually apply pressure in a cyber sense, and make no mistake, the US is doing exactly the same thing. So is the country we're standing in. Everybody's at it. It's just obviously the PR and the narrative is spun in a certain way that we mainly perceive it from our side of the fence, if you see what I mean. I have no idea what's going on the other side of the fence. I'm guessing other stuff too. It's just maybe on the other side of the fence, it's not as democratized, it's not as free market based, it's not as private company based. There's a certain willingness and a difference in terms of where those attacks and the motivation for those attacks come from, whether it's Russia or China or North Korea or anywhere else, is that when you throw attacks over the fence from east to west, what you're doing is you're attacking private enterprise as often as you're attacking anything else. And in fact, as is the case with both of these, but especially SolarWinds, you're attacking private enterprise in order to get to the government infrastructure that sits on top of it, because it's a different way of organizing things. And so I think this has been going on for years. I think it's just getting more elegant, it's getting more sophisticated. And I guess probably the most interesting conversation now is to have, well, look, this is how do you stop this? How do you create effective barriers and defenses against this sort of thing happening? And one suspects that is a systemic change that's required there. Especially with the exchange stuff, that's a massive problem, because so many companies have worked on the back of Microsoft Exchange on premise, as it were, for so long, decades, that it's an incredibly difficult thing to unpick, and time itself is what creates the vulnerability in many cases. And so we need a whole new paradigm, really.
That's it.
We should get someone on the podcast who knows about this to ask what the future is all about here. I think that would be interesting.
Definitely. I think in terms of some of the Exchange software hadn't been patched up for over a decade. So you're right in when you make the point about time. Dan, let's ask you to put your tech for good hat on. There is definitely a concern here, isn't there, around the security and safety of kind of the systems that underpin public services?
Yeah, and obviously my tech for good hat is made from wholly sustainable materials as well.
Yes.
But as Ron mentioned, the WannaCry attack 3 or 4 years ago, and that really exposed sort of how the public sector ran on outdated systems. And it's probably too early to say now how this one is going to affect it. But it'll be interesting to see how the public sector has updated since the WannaCry attack, and how this is kind of its test case scenario, isn't it? If it suddenly cost the NHS £90 million again, like it did, like the WannaCry attack did, then it's learnt nothing. So it's hard to really kind of predict how it's going to go. We do know that NHS has spent a lot of money on updating their systems and their whole digital infrastructure, and so has the UK government. Where I'm more interested in seeing the impact is in local government, which again has run on pretty outdated systems that are rarely connected, and there's little collaboration between them as well. So that's only really going to emerge in the next sort of few weeks and few months, I think. But although, as Ron sort of asked, how do you tackle this? Well, Microsoft and other big sort of IT and software organizations have education programs now, don't they? So Microsoft very much go to public sector, go to government, go to health organizations, and work with them to ensure these kind of things have minimal risk. And they spend a vast amount of money ensuring this as well, because they know it's a problem that's not going to go away. You can't get rid of it. Again, it's a bit like coronavirus. We won't get rid of it. It's just learning to live with it.
Yeah, definitely. The education point is a really interesting one, actually, because I've heard numerous times, like, a huge percentage of cyber attacks are down just to kind of human error and human ignorance. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of time and investment being spent on that. Right, chaps, thank you very much. We're going to wrap things up there. Next up, we're going to delve into automation and the future of work. But first, this.
Find us as Digital Bulletin on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and at Digi_Bulletin on Twitter.
For this month's case study portion of the show, we are going to review our feature on Bain Company. One of the prestigious Big Three management consultancies, Bain has built out a team dedicated to supporting clients with advice and strategy around automation. Reports from Bain themselves found that US companies alone could invest $8 trillion in automation technologies over the course of this decade. We had the privilege of speaking to Ted Shelton, expert partner in automation and digital innovation for Bain. So before we open this up to the panel, here is Ted talking about business pressures and why automation should be a strategic imperative.
Every company needs to be constantly thinking about how do they improve their operations? They are under pressure to reduce cost, to increase the speed with which they deliver, to increase the quality of the product or the service that they are delivering. And so every company needs to be constantly looking at their marketplace and looking at what the strategic drivers are for actually changing those cost, quality, and speed curves. What we believe is that technology is one of those strategic imperatives for companies. Digital has been disrupting the way we do business now for decades. What we see in automation in particular is that there is now a parallel complementary way for companies to approach the question of how do they improve their operations? How do they reduce cost? How do they improve speed? How do they improve quality? Traditional IT allows us to put the systems, the software, the infrastructure, the devices in place to be able to serve the work being done by people. What automation does is complement the people in doing that work. And that's the major strategic difference in the way in which we're going to think about work going forward.
Dan, this is your first Digital Bulletin case study, so congratulations on that, first of all. Maybe start by telling us giving us a sense of how much time and investment Bain is kind of putting into this area.
Well, it's certainly a growing area for Bain. It's not new for them, and it's led by Ted, who you just listened to there, who's really sort of interesting and evangelical about it. He was a really cool guy, definitely sort of coding in the morning and then surfing in the evening kind of guy. So it was a real pleasure to talk to, but he's kept his team relatively small. So they've got a specialist sort of automation center of excellence team, but their approach is more collaborative. So they partner with a sort of network of specialist tech companies or tech and software companies such as UiPath and Fortress IQ, who have mentioned in it as well. And that they would say that makes them more flexible. So it's not one size fits all for all the organizations they work with. They find out what the organization's needs are and how automation can best serve that, and then how they can partner. They can introduce a specific partner to best serve that need as well. So they do things slightly differently and a little bit more sort of flexibly.
And it's also with their service, I guess it's about, and the article goes into this quite a lot actually, but it's about supporting those businesses with like process change as much as kind of just picking some technology off a shelf and implementing it, right?
Yeah, Ted was big on talking about technology as one of, I think as he says in that quote, actually one of the strategic imperatives, but it's very much just one of them. It's there to support the big decisions rather than take the lead on the big decisions. So their sort of success in automation relies on more than using great technology. It relies on the executives and the C-suite working out how best to use that technology rather than just getting the great technology and hoping it improves processes both for customers and for employees. That's the wrong way around. Bain have a sort of, I call it future back, where they get the goal in mind, work backwards from there and work out how to automate from there. You can have all the great tech you can, but it's how you use it. It's a bit like, I don't know, like a miner working underground with a flash headlight that keeps flashing on and off. You'll get the work done, but you won't get it done as quickly. And automating is a kind of a flashlight that's on all of the time. It just allows a streamlining of process, and that's how Bain work, really.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back, Rom, to another automation story we told with Telefonica in Spain, and actually it's quite similar in the sense that it was robotic process automation, which is what UiPath do, and in that case it was Blue Prism, who is one of UiPath's big kind of rivals in that space. But on that story as well, we had a consulting company, EY, and obviously Bain, that's what they do. Does it kind of show that when it comes to like automation and integrating automation, which is one of those big technologies that the businesses are actually able to implement and drive change with, that a company coming in from the side and actually helping with this massive kind of organizational change is essential, isn't it? And that's where Bain has seen this kind of opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where it starts becoming less about a piece of technology and more about the future of work. What is the future of work? Because automation, on one hand, for people that you're deploying it on, can be quite scary, but actually its purpose very rarely is. We told a very similar story with BT a while ago. Obviously, BT, massive telco in the UK, just in case anyone isn't aware of that. it's the same thing. They're saying, look, we've got a load of people who are doing pretty mundane, routine things. Serious percentages of these people's time is being spent just shuffling systems or bits of information from one thing to another place. We've all been on the phone to someone as they've said, okay, so just bear with me. I'm just waiting for that screen to load. And you go, obviously, you're on the end of the phone. You go, you're loading a screen. Like, what? Why is it not just on your screen already? Like, what's going on? It's because they've got multiple different processes. And the automation layer comes on top and it says, do you know what? We can save serious percentages of time for the people that are already working with us. It's not threatening their jobs. The theory is humans are way better at doing things that aren't that. They're better at thinking creatively, problem solving, forming relationships with their customers, and generally treating people well, and all those other things. And that's where automation helps. And the future of work is about actually ending up in a kind of partnership with, it's a bit kind of weird to say a partnership with AI. You're not really, you don't have a partner with you don't partner up with an algorithm. What you do is you are supported by a set of software tools that make your job way easier to do in terms of the mundane stuff, so that you can spend far more time doing the kind of complicated, difficult thinking type stuff that humans are actually good at, if you see what I mean. And Bain seemed to be of that mind 100%. And it's interesting how there was a lot of talk about ethics and things like that are part of the Bain story. It's, there's a bigger picture. It's like, well, hang on, this might be great for you as a company. There might be efficiencies and costs efficiencies to be found here, but how does this affect your community? The community of people around you, ultimately they are your stakeholders. And I was quite taken with how he talked about that.
Yeah, it's a good point, because often with automation and like topics around future of work, it is quite hard to rationalize that in your head sometimes. And certainly the hybrid workforce is a topic we're going to talk about in a minute. But Dan's case study leads on this idea of Bain helping organizations plan for 2030. So looking ahead 10 years and at the future of work. And you mentioned it there, but of course, another key technology between now and then will be artificial intelligence. In this next clip, Ted touches on the interaction between automation, so RPA, and AI, and how this is a crucial element in businesses achieving what he calls the holy grail: greater efficiency and increased revenues.
Automation becomes one of these key bridges for us to be able to get to that future state. That future state being one in which we should expect that artificial intelligence is actually a key part of how we are creating success in our businesses. Many different areas of the business are going to be impacted by these algorithms, these analytical approaches to the data that we're collecting about our business. A company that does not start looking at AI today is one that in 3 years will be behind, and in 5 years will be at risk. Every industry, every business, every part of every business is going to be impacted by these tools. And automation becomes a way to be able to insert the insights that we get from these artificial intelligence tools into business processes.
Dan, Ted is saying there essentially, isn't he, that automation is kind of the key to unlocking the power of artificial intelligence. Many organizations might see AI as something that is unachievable for them, but really it's kind of a step-by-step process. And one of the first steps is automation.
Yeah, as he mentions there, Ted is big on looking at the future of work. So he's not thinking a years from now, he's thinking 2025. And he's specifically in this example of the case study worked on looking ahead to 2030. And he believes that the future is very AI heavy. So rather than just task orientated automation, AI is going to start to dominate. And his belief is that the C-suite and the executives aren't well versed in artificial intelligence, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to think. But his and Bain's task is versing the C-suite in automation and AI, and showing them how that creates success as well. And again, this is where the likes of UiPath come in, because rather than introducing task-orientated automation, their robotics allows much more of a greater insight through artificial intelligence. So their platforms enable sort of faster, more accurate outcomes for sort of their business processes. And this is still a little while off yet, and most organizations won't be implementing the use of AI for a good while yet. But Bain are all about thinking about 5 years from now and 10 years from now to get organizations really business ready and thinking about it before their competitors start thinking about it.
Yeah, there's definitely a kind of sense of urgency in Ted's words, though. I mean, the quote that stood out to me, Ron, was, I'm going to read it out verbatim. A company that does not start looking at AI today is one that in 3 years will be behind and in 5 years will be at risk. Two things, Ron. Firstly, are we looking at AI? Because I still want to have a business in 5 years. And secondly, do you believe him?
Yeah. Actually, the answer to both your questions is yes. but then you know that. Yes. So fundamentally, one thing I think that is generally speaking true, and this is a grotesque oversimplification, obviously, is that competition between companies is accelerating. It's becoming because digitization is just a massive part of what just about everyone does. No matter what they make or whatever they do, everything is servitized and digital. The pace of change is far quicker than it ever used to be. Therefore, efficiencies and insights and business intelligence and so on becomes ever more important, so that you can make better decisions more quickly, that every individual person in an organization is able to act quicker and smarter, and so on and so on. In other words, if you're not using the right tools to enable you to compete on that basis, then in 3 years, everything you do is going to cost a lot more than everything that your competitors do. And then in 5 years, that will punish you a lot. And yes, you'll be at risk. That seems completely correct and believable. And obviously, the bigger you are as an organization, the more important that is, because you're operating at such greater scale, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And that's why we talk to so many people about automation, not just automation, intelligent automation as well, which is, the application of that artificial intelligence layer on top of the process stuff. So yeah.
Another thing we hear a lot is the hybrid workforce. Dan, what is Bain's interpretation of this, and how did kind of Ted tackle that thorny issue that can often be around kind of people and jobs and automation?
Well, yeah, I mean, Ted was emphasized a lot that people are critical still to a hybrid workforce, but then it's, he would, and Bain would say that as well, because there are genuine worries how the workforce will change, and not necessarily for the better for sort of lower income workforce in the next 5 or 10 years because of automation and AI. But Bain sees a hybrid workforce as machines doing the repetitive work and people doing the sort of more creative work that relies on curiosity. And obviously, machines can't be curious yet. And Ted didn't actually touch on what he think might happen if machines do become curious, because then what are we supposed to do as humans? But he wants people doing sort of problem solving, as Ron touched on earlier, and sort of relationship building, and machines doing what he terms, and this is a really cute American phrase, of swivel seat activities, which I must admit I'd not heard before. So moving from one part to the right, inputting some data from a spreadsheet, and then swiveling to your left and inputting that into something else. So he feels Bain feels that's the way the workforce is moving, and he would argue that just frees up time for more critical thinking and time for humans to do what they do best, which is be really curious about the world and come up with creative and new ideas. And he's big on sort of urging the C-suite and executives to think through how that hybrid works, and not just how it can save money, but how AI and automation complement the human workforce, rather than overtake the human workforce, but how it can complement it rather than override it and make it redundant, which obviously none of us are very keen on.
And augment, indeed. That's another word we hear a lot with this kind of thing. Okay, chaps, that was really good. We're going to draw a line under the case study here. But if you want to learn more about Bain & Company's automation practice, you can check out Dan's article on digitalbulletin.com, or indeed listen to Dan reading that article on the Digital Bulletin podcast stream. We'll be back after this.
Power up your day with the Bulletin Brief, the latest news, insights and opinion delivered straight to your inbox.
Now, next up, we have an interview with Gianpiero Lotito. A very interesting man, Gianpiero. He has been president of the European Tech Alliance and is the co-founder of FacilityLive, a European tech startup wanting to change how we access information. In the interview, Gianpiero tells me why algorithms cannot ensure search engine reliability, and he discusses his company's ambition to disrupt what he calls the Google monopoly. with its unique software for the organization management and search of information. But first, I asked him why he founded FacilityLive.
Good question, Ben, because because I and Mariuccia Teroni come from a long experience in publishing world, and since 1987, because we were a very young pioneer in Italy in digital application for the publishing world, and you know that the publishing world was the first industry in the world to marry completely the digital revolution, because it was the first massive application, for example, of Apple Macintosh or the laser printers, Photoshop, and many other things came directly from the Silicon Valley in the publishing world. So it was a huge experience because we were lucky because we had the possibility to work with the last analog generation of that world that knew every kind of methodology, process, etc. To be applied in the content management for the publishing world. After 15 years of this experience, we saw the first generation of search engines that were at the beginning, 2001, 2002, they were babies, really. And we compared our publishing experience with the way to inspect the web of the search engine of that period, and we understood very early that there was the possibility to build something different to approach the access to information.
Now, we know FacilityLive has this ambition, this aim to kind of disrupt the Google monopoly, as you call it. What do you mean by that?
I don't like the way to tell our experience, like David versus Goliath. No? But I think that is a very fascinating way to describe our adventure. I think that there are different spaces in this moment inside the web, because we have a first generation of search engines that address you to find everything you want to search in the huge mass of information that are without order and without organization inside the web. There is another way to see the web in the future, more organized, more structured, with technologies that can give to you the possibility to access the information more fastly, with more precision, having directly what you are searching for. A little bit, if you want, like an encyclopedic approach versus a chaotic approach, entropic approach. But I think that both will exist in the future with different purposes, with different services for the users. I use Google every day, and it is very useful, but there are limits to use it now to have the best quality and the best experience to access information.
Okay, so this is all about human search processing, isn't it? So can you talk a bit about what that is and how it underpins what FacilityLive does?
Yes. In 2014, in my first speech in the European Parliament, I told, I think that no one of you is ready to live in an algorithmic society where a machine decides what is important for you. No? And it was 2014. There was no algorithmic battle on the way. It was the intuition of a technologist, of a person that is working since 34 years on these problems. We are used today to be driven by an algorithm without thinking on which kind of problems give to us this, because we have a great difficulty to access the right information that we are searching for. So we tell to an algorithm, suggest me what is the best, but it's not a natural approach to information. The natural approach is, I ask for this, and you give me this nor that, like happen very often, no? For this reason, a human approach to the search is what we are trying to transfer in our technology every day. I speak about human processing and not natural processing, because the natural language processing is part of the history of the computer science that come to the 90s, for example. So a human approach where really there is a flipping in the relationship between man and machine, human and machine, where is the human that is completely in control of the information and of the access to information, and not an algorithm that drives you like it wants.
Okay, it's a really interesting thought, Gianpiero. Who do you think can benefit the most from this technology and what it offers? Is it a specific set of people? Could everyone benefit from it, do you think?
But in the long term, what is the vision of me and Mariuccia Teroni about the future of the access to information, and think that I speak always about access to information and not search, no? Because I think that are two different things. So having the possibility to have these two things, you can search in some cases and access to information in other cases. If we are right about this, in the future you will see more and more technology that will marry this second vision: organized information, structured and offered to the people in control, because you need to be helped by an algorithm if the technology is not able to give to you the right answer. But if the technology is able to give to you the right answer, you don't need to be driven by an algorithm. So are two ways. In the future, if the human approach that we are proposing will have the space that we think will have, you can have benefit for individuals, for example, because you will use this kind of a technology respectful of privacy, respectful of the ethical matters that for us are fundamental. We don't profile the users, for example. You can give to the people the technology to organize their own information on their own devices. So you can have also in the future a personal experience to access your information driven by you.
Fascinating stuff, Gianpiero. Now, I know you've had a sort of a long and a distinguished career in technology, and this sounds like something you're really excited about. How excited are you about the future for this technology and what it ultimately could achieve in areas that are really important, like the quality of information that we receive and that people have at their fingertips? Like, it's a really important area, this, isn't it?
The future is a future dominated by some different situation. First of all, we will see the emerging of 3 blocks in technology in the world. Now we are seeing 2 dominating blocks, US and Far East. Europe is the follower in this moment in digital application and in anything is related to digital. But in this moment, Europe is going to be a protagonist, building his first generation of digital champion, the European digital champions. And this is important because we will see a wave of new technologies, new companies, new kind of services coming from Europe and not only from Silicon Valley or from Far East. This is one scenario, an important scenario. The second scenario is that we will look at a lot of technologies that will be about information management, but information management means a lot of things. Correctly, you have seen about the quality of the information, reliability. No, one of the things that I wrote an article in the 2004, and I wrote in that article that rumor that is noise, information noise, no, could be cancelled by algorithm, and was the truth. Redundancy, the repetition of the same information continuously, that at that time was a problem for users, was cancelled by algorithms. But I wrote that reliability could not be possible to be cancelled by algorithms, because in reliability you need the human capability to understand completely an information, and sometimes the blend is so narrow, is so small that only our brain can distinguish if it's a good information or not, a good source or not, a credible information or not. So this is a lack. I don't think that the artificial intelligence can solve the problem of fake news or the reliability of sources and information. Luckily, this is a capability that will remain to the humans.
Right, it's time for us to let you go, listener. First, though, some podcast plugs for you. You can listen to a back catalogue of all our Digital Bulletin case studies in audio form right on this podcast feed. We have new episodes of Fragmented Reality 2, and also our Tech for Good podcast has gone weekly, featuring interviews on topics like solar energy innovation and delivering emergency communications networks during humanitarian crises. Fascinating stuff. Dan, Tech for Good issue 9 came out last week. Sell it to our listeners.
So we've gone for a special. It's a smart city special with a headline story, probably Bentley Systems taking us on a tour of the continents to show us what the future of cities look like. And we also spoken to Samsung's head of sustainability in the UK, as well as the UN as well, and how their digital transformation is helping refugees through the pandemic.
Fantastic. It's a really great issue, beautifully designed and put together by the team. So well worth going to have a look at. Last thing to do is to say thank you to the panel. Romilly, thank you as ever.
My pleasure.
Dan, thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
A pleasure. And we'll be back in a month's time, listener. I hope you can join us then.
That was the Digital Bulletin podcast, brought to you by Bulletin Media. Listen and subscribe to a range of podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Plug in for news, features and case studies on the very latest in enterprise technology and digital transformation.